a student, I hate Monday mornings. I hate the alarm clock going off. I don't want to get up and go to class. For a lot of kids around the world, that's their greatest dream. It was April 19th, 1995, 12 years old. I was looking for the comics in the paper, and the headline said, "Boy 12 murdered." And so I start reading the story about this young boy in Pakistan named Iqbal Masih, and how at the age of 4 he was taken away from the family. He worked 12 hours a day, every single day, tying thousands of tiny little knots, making carpets that largely end up in Europe or North America. And then at the age of 10 he escapes, and he starts traveling around the world, raising awareness about child labor, and he's shot dead. And most people believe that he was killed because he was speaking out against child labor. I was angry enough that the first thing I did was actually rip off the front page of the paper, and then got to my grade 7 class and started reading the story in front of my classroom and said, "I need your help." And 11 hands went up, and Free the Children was born. I remember when we first started, we said we were going to build one school, and people laughed at us. You know, that was 10 years ago. We've worked with more than 1 million children in 45 countries around the world, including building 420 primary schools, which every single day serve about 40,000 children. Hey, my name's Craig Kielburger. I'm the founder of Free the Children, 23 years old. 10 years ago when I was 12, with a group of grade 7 friends, we started it. And now it's the world's largest network of children helping children, youth helping youth. A fundraise to build more than 420 primary schools around the world. We're in a Free the Children primary school in Sri Lanka. After the tsunami, we helped to rebuild it. Field some of your questions.
Hi, Mr. Kielburger. I'm Rabbi. Can I call you Craig?
Of course.
Okay, to begin with, my first question was, you know, at the tender age of 12, you've started a massive organization. Did you ever lose your childhood or miss out on fun that other children had and you haven't?
It was definitely a different type of childhood. Did my grade 8 graduation in Haiti, was traveling to more than 40 countries by the time I was 17. We had an office and a staff, meeting prime ministers and presidents. But truthfully, I think I had the most amazing childhood in the world. How many young people get a chance to come to Sri Lanka, to travel to parts of Africa that a white person's never been to literally travel the world? You know, childhood's about a lot more than just video games, TV, hanging around malls. A lot of adults say that's all there is to youth. I don't believe it. I think that even if you're young, you find an issue you're passionate about, you take action now. Why be just an adult in waiting? And so, did I have a different type of childhood? Yeah, but I think I was the luckiest kid in the world.
Hi, Mr. Kielburger. My name's Imran. My question for you today is, although it was inevitable that you would come across some obstacles while you are setting up this charity, I would like to know the nature of these obstacles and how you would overcome them.
The obstacles that we faced were many. Everything from tin pot dictators in developing countries when we tried to build schools, to factory owners who didn't want us taking kids out of their factories and putting them in schools. The greatest obstacle wasn't overseas. It wasn't a dictator or a factory owner. It was back home, you know, North America for us. Adults who wouldn't take us seriously, who looked at us as a group of young people and said, "Nice idea, you're dreaming. You can't eliminate poverty. You can't put every child in the world to school. It's always been this way. It's always going to be this way." We found two things to prove them wrong. One, research. Knowledge is power. We had the stats, we had the statistics, we proved that change is possible. And two, we gathered more people, more power. We have 100,000 young people all around the world. When they raise their voice, they build 420 schools. They help 1 million kids in developing countries. They change laws in Italy, Canada. They make things happen. That proves the adults wrong.
Hi, I'm Aisha. Did the responsibility ever become a nuisance to you at such a young age? And if so, what did you do about it?
That's a really interesting question. I don't have an easy answer to it. Yeah, it was a lot of responsibility. But I think what was the most responsibility out of it all was that we met a lot of kids who we couldn't help at the time, and the only promise that we could make to them was that we'd carry their stories back. Like, there was a young girl who I met in India who was 8 and she worked in a recycling factory, and she was taking apart used syringes and needles for their plastics. And she had no gloves, she had no shoes, and you could see her hands were cut. And she'd never heard of AIDS. She had no idea of the dangers of her job. And we were rushed out because we were told that if the master saw her talking and not working, the master would beat her. And I've gone back to India 4 times to that same village. And every time I go back, I went with a photo of her trying to find her, and we never did. And I feel, in a sense, a responsibility that I should have done something to act. And so in almost every speech I give still to this day, I share that one story of that one girl. So yeah, it is a responsibility, but it's a responsibility I think we all have whenever we see something wrong and whenever we've seen an injustice to speak out. I don't think we should shrug from those responsibilities. We do human rights work not because it's easy, but because it's necessary.
Hi Greg, I'm Deborah Aya. You come from a rich country, but now that you travel all around the world and see other poor people suffering from all that painful things in the world, have you also changed your lifestyle?
I think to live and to bring about a positive change in the world, there's a word that I always try, or a phrase that I always try to live by, and never quite succeed, but it's always a goal. And it's the words of Mahatma Gandhi. And he said, be the change you want to see in the world. That simple idea of be the change. A lot of people think that charity ends when you put a few dollars in a person's cup. It's how we live our lives every day. You know, for me, where I shop, talk's cheap, so let's talk. Try to ask, where's the product made, under what type of working conditions? Every way from casting a ballot, I'll never miss an election, whether it be local, national, whatever. You know, you make your voice heard. People in other countries literally dying for democracy, to how we spend our free moments. You know, a vacation for me, it's great to go relax on a beach. It's fun to hang out with friends, but a Saturday afternoon or a week off in March break, go volunteer. You know, whether it be volunteering in your own neighborhood. We, in our office, have a Sunday tradition. Every Sunday, we make omelets in the park because we're in a pretty rough neighborhood. To overseas, taking a week off and working in one of our schools, working in Mother Teresa's orphanage. Be the change you want to see in the world. You know, we can't all be Gandhi, but we can at least try to be true to ourselves.
Hi, my name is Hodrin. How do you motivate people to make a change around the world?
How do you motivate people to make a change around the world? I wish I had the answer to that question. Because you look right now at Sudan, Darfur, there's a genocide taking place, and the world is enacting. You look at the issue of education for kids, 115 million children between 5 and 11 are not stepping foot into a classroom. How do we make world leaders care? You know, there's poverty going on in the world, and we spend $1 trillion on arms, $400 billion on cigarettes, $140 billion drinking beer, and $40 billion playing golf. When all it would take to put every child in the world into school, $10 billion annually. So how do we motivate people to take action? How do we motivate people? It starts with caring. It starts with looking at someone and realizing that child may be in Sri Lanka, London, the States, Thailand, doesn't matter. Still a child. And that child has basic human rights. It's the responsibility of all of us to ensure those rights are fulfilled. Educate ourselves. You know, when I talk to young people, it's the first step. Knowledge is power. Educate yourself to find how you can take action, whatever your gift may be. Some people are great at public speaking. Some people are great at music. Some people are great at art. Some people are good listeners. They're quiet. They're compassionate. Whatever your gift is, find your gift, find your issue, and match it together. It's the equation for social change.
Hello, my name is Lily and I'm in year 10. And my question to you is that you're helping a lot of people, a lot of children, but I'm also concerned about the terrible problem with climate change, and I want to ask you, what can we, young people, do about it?
That's an awesome question. And you're right, we are helping a lot of children. And climate change maybe seems like a different issue. It's not. Every issue is interconnected. It doesn't matter where you start. You could start on the issue of child education, you could start on the issue of slavery, you could start on the issue of racism, sexism, violence, or you could start in climate change. Because I honestly believe they're all interconnected. For example, we work in Kenya. We help a lot of street kids. And when we hang out with street kids, we often ask them how they ended up on the streets. And they tell us that they came from the rural areas, and their families were really poor. And so the oldest child got sent to the streets. And then we ask another question. We say, well, why were you poor? And they tell us the fact that they were farmers and the rain didn't fall for the past couple of years, and so their crops didn't grow. And then we go to the village and we ask another question, and we ask why wasn't the rain falling, and they tell us about how they cut down all these trees for export. One case in Kenya, there was an American agribusiness that came in that was growing flowers for export, and they drilled these massive bore wells and were sucking the water out of the ground to get flowers for Valentine's Day or for Mother's Day. When you start asking questions, you learn that all these issues are interconnected. When the rain doesn't fall in Kenya because of global warming, kids end up on the streets. They end up in child labor. Young girls end up in prostitution. Young boys end up breaking bricks. Every issue is interconnected. And because of poverty, people are desperate. They are going to cut down trees. They are going to not be able to lift up living standards and ensure that cars with lower fumes and emissions in a country like Sri Lanka. We need to attack it on every single level. So it doesn't matter what your passion is, environment, animal rights, child labor, education, racism, sexism, you name it. Just take action, because they're all interconnected.
Hello Craig, I'm Shavik. I want to ask you a question that, as adults don't take it seriously, what can we do to improve the world? That's all my question is. Thank you.
Adults don't take us seriously. So what can we do to improve the world? Well, the adults left the world in a pretty good place, don't you think? Nuclear weapons, poverty, discrimination, global warming. How about we not take the adults very seriously? And how about instead we simply do what we want to do, which is create a better world? And I'm half kidding, but I'm half serious at the end of the day. When we were 12, we first started, we had adults who tapped us on the head and they said, oh, look how cute. This group of kids is going to change the world. You know what? 10 years later, that group of kids worked with more than 1 million children around the world. 625,000 families every day use our clean water projects, our health clinics, and alternative income cooperatives for women. 420 primary schools in developing countries. 200,000 students in North America use our textbooks and their curriculum. 500 students every year volunteer in developing countries with us. That's because a group of grade 7 students sitting around didn't listen when those adults said, can't change anything. I really believe that the most powerful force in our world are young people, because it's an untapped force. Like, if you look at it, in history, we often see these images of these great social justice leaders. We often see them later on in life, when they finally won their struggles. And so we look back at the apartheid movement, the anti-apartheid movement, or we look back at Lech Walesa and fighting communism, and we look back at Dr. Martin Luther King in the States fighting racism, and we see these images of adults. But we forget that the people who marched in the front, the people who faced the brunt of the water cannons in the time of Dr. King were students. In India, you had young people who were arrested by the hundreds, school-age children. These are kids 10, 11 years old who were rounded up in Gandhi's salt marches. In China, in Tiananmen Square, it was students who stood in front of tanks. Or in South Africa, against the apartheid regime, it was students who were shot as they marched. In every great social justice movement, students have been at the forefront of social change in our world. We often don't forget it because it's years. We often forget it because it's years later when we finally recognize the victories, and often those faces are now, instead of young students, the faces of older adults. Students have amazing power to bring about change when we actually look through history. So the answer to adults who don't take us seriously, don't take them seriously in turn. Do your research, have your stats, have the answers, because knowledge is power, but at the end of the day, nothing should hold you back. If you have a dream, look at Free the Children today, follow it.